I'm Anne Marie Battistone, and this is a special on Norfolk Cable TV. This is a show in which members of the class of '59 of King Philip High School reminisce about their experiences at the brand new school. So we have a group here at the table, and we have a few people in the audience that are going to be chiming in and talking about their time in 1959 at King Philip High School. Ernie?
I'm Ernie Alex, class of 1959, King Philip High School. Welcome to our recording of the history on how three small towns got together to build the King Philip Regional High School. We never planned for this recording date to fall on the anniversary of 9/11, and we'd like to dedicate this reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance to the victims and survivors of 9/11. Please join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one country, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We, the class of 1959, are a product of the greatest generation. The American flag that we just pledged allegiance to has gone from 48 stars to 50. We have gone from children questioning everything to looking at 80 in our headlights, or some of us in our rearview mirrors. We went from old fire-trapped schools to a new, safe, modern one. We left for summer vacation with 20 to 30 classmates. We returned as juniors to join approximately 100 new classmates, most of them strangers. When we were in our old schools, we were like brothers and sisters, unless we were dating. We were teenagers in the 50s and brought about a great change. There was a new thing trying to replace our radios called TV. Howdy Doody and the Mickey Mouse Club gave way to Dick Clark and the American Bandstand. On the radio, Bing Crosby, Perry Como gave way to Elvis and Chuck Berry. Classmates were excited to go where they could get a diploma and move on to college. High school to me wasn't very useful. Take geometry. Some famous Greek said parallel lines never meet. We changed that by bending one of them. The 50s was the beginning of non-conforming. Those of us that didn't have college in our future went to vocational school, vocational carpentry and machine shop. We became the boys that girls would love to hate, would love to date, and their parents would hate. There's something in that. Some classmates had favorite teachers in math, science, and homeroom. In the shop area, we had one favorite teacher, the driver training teacher. When you left that class, you had a driver's license. About this time, foreign cars started to show up. They offered good gas mileage, but no legroom. Our cars were made of good American steel and were made to take abuse, as were their large, roomy back seats. Some families lost family members in accidents with these cars. Other families gained family members from accidents in these cars. Despite all the previous changes to our lives, we remain proud Americans. I joined the Navy Air Force shortly after graduation. Here I was looking for direction in life. Wrong. I went to school, learned how to repair aircraft machine guns, load bombs and rockets on aircraft. I ended up on a ship stationed in Okinawa, Japan, signed to a group of explosive ordnance disposal divers. To make things worse, they gave me a secret clearance, send me to nuclear weapons school, and attach me to a nuclear weapons loading team, something you can really use once you get out of there. After the Navy, I worked my way up through construction, supervising, and finally as a senior construction superintendent. I retired just before being assigned to oversee the construction of the new King Philip Regional High School. When people come around with or without a mask, using the First Amendment as an excuse to burn the flag of my country, look around, you may see me or one of my classmates ready to use the Second Amendment to change your plans. I'd like to turn the mic over now to Anne Marie, to call on the reps from Rentham, Plainville, and Norfolk. And as a former resident of Plainville, I will represent Plainville with my good friend Grace.
All right, I just want to say before we get started, Ernie has done a tremendous amount of work on this. It is really he who has produced this. And so I just wanted to acknowledge him, and Christina, who is very fierce on the camera. She's back in the control room, and she's doing us all a great big favor. So I thought we might start with the topic of culture shock, because when we met before, it seemed as if a lot of you experienced that when you went to the big school. So whoever would like to begin, go right ahead.
I think I'm the one that
Eddie.
started at the last meeting. I basically got some things I wrote down, memories of the school. We only had 2 years there, so, it's a long time ago. I have trouble remember what I had for breakfast. Entering King Philip High School after attending a small, more relaxed system for 10 years was something of a culture shock, as I had said at a previous meeting. I really didn't get to know a lot of the people at King Philip the first year because I went to the vocational part of the school. I transferred to the main school in my senior year because the carpentry program, while being good, was offering much of what I already knew. My father was a carpenter, and I had been working with him since I was 10 or 12 years old. Also, to tell you the truth, there was a girl I was very much interested in at the main school. We were a class couple in the yearbook. It was just a coincidence that she was co-editor of the yearbook. We have been married for 58 years. Did I mention I was interested in her? I remember Mrs. Capron, our English teacher, very well. She never raised her voice, but she could control any unruly student with just a look. She was quite a person. I also liked Mr. Tuzingnot in the vocational program. He was very knowledgeable and fair, although there was one time I raised my hand and asked, can I go to the restroom? He answered me by asking, may I go to the bathroom? My response was, why, do you have to go too? I believe that was the only time I ever got a detention. There was also Mike Cosentino. He still teaches golf at Heather Hill and never seems to age. I met and became very good friends with Gene Newman. We both worked at the then new Stop and Shop in North Attleboro until graduation. Gene became a machinist at MIT, and I went into the building trades. I got to know some other students and still either have them as friends or at least acquaintances. It was all a long time ago, and it's difficult to remember many details. I do have fond memories of my short time at KP, and it was a good experience.
Well, some more memories may come to the surface as other people start to talk.
Yeah.
Nancy, what was it like for you going to the big school?
What I wrote?
Well, yeah, fine. I mean, we were just talking about,
It's exciting,
the
too.
culture shock. Go ahead.
Right, and then I got to meet him. The
was a
previous
shock.
speaker.
Class couple, we're married now for 59 years.
So you're still interested in her?
I hope so.
Sometimes.
Shall I read this now?
Yes,
The
yes.
fall of 1958, the towns of Rentham, Norfolk, and Plainville sent their students in grades 7 through 12 to a brand-new school in Rentham. What excitement. Norfolk students never had their own high school and had been bused to a high school in Walpole and were called the Stagecoach Kids. The new high school was named King Philip Regional School. The three towns blended well in the new facility, especially the 7th grade girls and the senior boys. My husband, Ed Furl, and I were both 11th graders. Many years later, a junior high school for grades 7 and 8 was built in Norfolk, a very good idea. Judy Langme Chase and I were yearbook editors for our yearbook, The Chieftain, and our advisor was Mrs. Kelleher. She escorted us to New York City by train to attend a convention on how to write the yearbook. She also took us to a Broadway play, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which was a little risque for the day, our favorite teacher. Many years have passed, and we are lucky to still have these KP memories. Nancy Crawford Furland.
Who would like to go? Bob, what have you got to say about your shock, or were you shocked when you went to the new school?
Absolutely. No question there. Particularly so, perhaps, for me, in that I lived in a very rural section of rural Rentham. Okay? My closest neighbors, in fact, believe it or not, were from Norfolk, okay? And they were at permanent rest. Okay, and for better or worse. But anyway, so it was a particular culture shock, and I just picked that up from you, in fact, and it seems to fit quite well, particularly in my case where I really didn't interface with anybody from the adjacent towns, okay, and certainly did through Rentham Public Schools, those in my town, no question about it. So they were my friends and basically my only young, friends and acquaintances. Okay, so it certainly was a culture shock to me. With respect to my junior year at King Philip, and I certainly learned a lot. I reflected back a little bit on how we lived 60 years ago, and it's just so different from now, and our frame of mind was very, very different back in that age of non-communication, okay, and very different. And in reviewing some of the literature that I've received in the past from, past junctures, okay, and meetings of our 59 class, okay, I did come across a paper submitted by Sue Paulus, okay, author unknown, and entitled "We Are Survivors," okay, and it listed so many different things that pointed out to us how different things were and how elementary everything was to us back in those times. So this is the framework and the state of mind, perhaps is a better way to put it, state of mind that we all had when indeed we entered King Philip in 57, okay, or 58, I guess. And things like, for example, pizzas, McDonald's, instant coffee were unheard of, and 5 and 10 cent stores, and oh, good Lord, the Chevy Coupe you could buy for $600, okay? Ernie would know all about that, okay? That's probably what he paid for his, I wouldn't doubt. You can ask him later on that, Anne Marie. Okay, we'll find out. We'll find out.
Off the air.
We'll get the details, okay? Good Lord. And let's see, this is, oh yeah, the last statement here is really good. We were certainly not before the difference between the sexes was discovered, okay, and other things that are perhaps more different than that. So anyway, I guess I was trying to point out that our state of mind was just, and our state of existence and living was so different than nowadays. We can hardly comprehend it.
It's true.
In this digital time.
It's really
okay?
true.
Nobody even knew what digits were back 60 years ago when we went to school, okay? So anyway, here I am at King Philip, and I knew barely, 30% or whatever the number is, okay, of those students there, and coming from a very rural part of Rentham, so
I'm just curious, where exactly was that? In Rentham, where you grew up? What part of Rentham was it?
As I mentioned, my closest neighbors resided in Norfolk. Okay, so I'm actually right at the apex of Norfolk, Foxborough, and Rentham.
Oh, okay.
In the direction of
and,
Pondville Hospital.
Towards Pondville?
Rural road.
Pondville
A little
Cemetery.
rural road.
Oh, he's talking about the Pondville Cemetery. Okay.
Yeah, Pondville Cemetery. Those are my neighbors.
I was just curious.
All very quiet. All very nice.
Stop
by the
it.
way,
They're all very
you know.
No
But
trouble.
anyway, here I am at King Philip, and so little by little I did fit in, okay? I met people and things, enjoyed it, and so forth. However, there's no question at virtually every lunchtime, okay, we congregated from the people of Rentham, Norfolk congregated with the people from Norfolk, and so forth, et cetera, okay? So the integration was not rapid. It was very slow, but I think it was deliberate, and I think it was it probably went pretty well. I can't remember any fights or anything. You know, it was
along.
complimentary, and certainly people involved in sports did know each other from adjacent towns. Okay,
Oh, right.
I was not involved in sports, so I didn't have that advantage, and I'm sure that was helpful as well. And certainly those students that integrated the quickest were those in sports because of the team.
Right.
They were a team.
Right.
Okay,
That's
no matter
right.
where they were from, and that was certainly positive as well. Okay, but with respect to the advantages that I got at King Philip, okay, two majors, and very helpful. Okay, one was the very thing that you spoke of, Anne Marie, and that is the culture shock, okay? Meaning to say, I learned how to integrate with a mass of people.
Strangers.
Okay, that I had never done before. And that was knowing maybe, 30%, I don't know what the number is, whatever it is, okay, only 30% of our new school system. Okay, fine. Now, when I went to college, guess what? I didn't know anybody. Okay? So I truly believe that introduction at King Philip, okay, in 58 was very helpful to me to integrate with a huge mass of people, none of whom I ever knew, and a state I'd never been to.
Was a part of growing up, I imagine, too, that, you know.
Oh, big time. Oh, big. You either grow up or you flunk out. Okay, that's the way it works.
You know, I just want to throw out a question. Did you all move from one room to the other as a group?
Change classes?
Or, yeah, when you changed, or did you then get separated out from your homeroom?
We had home rooms, and then from home rooms, we'd go to our...
But you only went to your homeroom in the
Separate
morning.
classes, different-
They'd
different
have
living
separate
room.
classes as to what you were majoring in, or what you know, they had like English. They had English 1, 2, and 3. If you were highbrow, you went to 1, you work your way down to 3, you know. Those of us from vocational were usually in 3. And, but every now and then they didn't have room, so us poor guys from vocational get stuck in an A English class where, you know, we could care less. We could speak any Eng. That's all that mattered, you know.
See, my
So-
parents, I went to the vocational school the first year. They wanted me to do the academic part, so I went back to the other part of the school for all my academics. So it wasn't hard to integrate the second year, you know, our last year into it, because I was already there, yeah.
Was that a separate building?
It's a separate part of the school.
Oh,
Back-
separate part of the-
It was in the back part of the school.
But we had to change our clothes when we went from the
Yeah.
vocational
Oh, yeah.
to the other end. You
Oh,
weren't
geez, I
allowed,
never thought of that.
you weren't allowed to wear dungarees. So if you got called to the principal's
Dungarees.
office, which I knew that well, and or anything that you had to do, including going to lunch, you had to get out of your dungarees and put your regular clothes
Dungarees.
on to go over. But my green shoes always went with me. I never had to change those.
Green shoes.
That's a long story. We'll talk about that later. So let some of these other.
Did you wear like aprons or coveralls or something, Ernie? But you didn't just work in your school clothes.
We had separate clothes, old dungarees that we would wear.
Oh, okay. So you'd change right at the facility.
Right.
Okay.
You had to.
Yeah.
Let's see, Judith, what do you have anything for us?
Yes. Nancy and I both came to Norfolk from Boston, and we entered the brand-new school, the Norfolk Central Elementary School, which I think was in 1950. And we stayed until the 8th grade, and after we graduated from the 8th grade at Norfolk Central School in 1955, we were bused to Walpole High School to further our education because Norfolk didn't have a high school.
That's right.
And so we got a taste of what it was like in a big school and blending with other people that we didn't already know. We made good friends there. And after 2 years in Walpole came the transition to the King Philip Regional High School, where we made more new friends. And as I remember, the opening of the school went smoothly. We were encouraged to think of ourselves as a unit, not individuals from 3 different towns. And it was easy to make new friends, and I think we're all excited about that, the new school and making new friends. And I think we had opportunities there that we wouldn't have had if we stayed in our respective schools. Some parents were apprehensive about the new school being able to prepare us for after our high school years, but most of my classmates have very successful careers and professions, and today we're still friends, and we're getting to know each other even more because we only had those 2 years together, and so we have our class reunions every 5 years, and locally we get together with our local classmates every few months. And we have a great
Over
time
in Plainville, right?
in Plainville, and we invite
Fitzy's.
other friends from other classes or relatives or neighbors. We have a good time, but we also give back to the community because every time we meet, we bring items for the food pantry,
Oh,
or we've participated in Operation Stand Down to give items to the homeless veterans, and we provide gifts for elderly people at the holiday season,
oh,
and we've donated funds to the school.
oh, how
And
wonderful.
some of us support the drama, music, and sporting events at King Philip.
Oh, that's, now, tell me, so you all were in Walpole prior to going to King Philip?
Norfolk.
Norfolk, oh,
Just
okay. Oh, all right. Was there, you had mentioned the Walpole.
We lived in Norfolk, and we didn't have a high school
Right.
at all, because Plainville and Rentham had their own high school, but we didn't have one in Norfolk, so we were bused to Walpole for 2 years.
So now, your reunion is that going to be that party in October?
Yes.
So because actually, didn't you tell me something about the school opening at Halloween?
It was right around Halloween in 1957 that the school was finally ready for occupancy, but it wasn't fully functional. There was a lot of areas that couldn't be used. The teams couldn't play sports. And we had a kind of a trying time where we couldn't do everything. That was actually the class of 58. That's why we call ourselves the first class, because the previous classes, they couldn't do a full year, and they couldn't do everything they wanted to do because it just wasn't ready to go. Now, I think Joe would be the next one. Joe was a long-time Norfolk resident, and he can
Forever.
fill you in on more on the Norfolk end.
Clarence, what was the culture shock like for you at the new school?
Well, yeah, it was quite a shock. Like Ernie said, I started in Norfolk in the first grade in an old wooden schoolhouse, which does not exist anymore, and did my first grade first year there. Then there was a two-room schoolhouse in City Mills. It's a private residence now. I did second and
Two
third grade
rooms.
there. And one lady teacher taught both classes, which was kind of crazy, and two of her own kids were in the class.
They had to make do.
So from there, when the new central school was under construction, and went there through 8th grade, which Judy said we have graduation from there. My transition was a little different. My first freshman year was spent in Franklin High School because of where my family lived at the time, and which was not great because I lost all my Norfolk friends. And sophomore year, I was able to go back to Walpole and reunite with the Norfolk friends. And so going to King Philip and then meeting all new friends again, it was great.
Sad, yeah.
I really enjoyed the time there. I was in vocational, as Ernie was, and
We were the only two seniors
yeah,
in vocational.
Oh,
yeah, because vocational was kind of a mixed bag. In the shop class, we had underclassmen that we helped because both Ernie and I had experience in tools and stuff like that, and we helped the teacher with the younger kids. And I had two students that I taught how to use a wood lathe because I had one at home and I knew how to do it. The teacher was basically from house construction, so a lot of those things he did not know, and we all worked together. But yeah, it was a great trip all the way. I mean, I wouldn't have had it any other way.
oh, that's, not everybody can say that.
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
you're very lucky to be able to say that, because I think, I know for me, high school was a kind of a tough crowd, a lot of very wealthy kids. It was very separated out by class, social class. Grace, what have you got? Any anecdotes?
I grew up in Plainville, started first grade, like Clarence in Plainville, in a wooden school, which is torn down now. One of our culture shocks was a lot of the Plainville students lived near the school, and we could walk to school. And when we went to King Philip, we had to take the bus. So riding the bus was a whole new experience, getting up on time,
Oh, yes.
catching the bus, being sure we were on the bus to come home, that type of thing. So that was different. But I think we melded very well with the kids from other classes, other towns, and one of the things we really liked, because our Plainville High School was very old and drafty, we had a bright new cafeteria with an ice cream bar at King Philip. The classrooms were bright and cheery. We had football team, which Plainville never had, field hockey, sports, and some of the classes, they introduced Spanish, German, and later down the road, not for our class, but later, Russian.
Really?
So there was a lot of opportunities and new science labs. So it was really, really good. And I was on the student representative administrative council when the school was being built and I was from Plainville. And they would tell us what was going on. They would keep us abreast of what was happening with the building. And one of the things we did was choose the colors
Oh, right.
and the logo. Now, the logo is the Chieftain King Philip. And I know in today's society, they're discouraging Native American logos. We honored King Philip
Right.
because he frequented this area. There was a King Philip tree in Rentham.
Oh.
And so it's really part of the history. It's not to denigrate him.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's, basically, I loved being at King Philip.
Oh, you know, I didn't know King Philip was a Native American. I thought he was, I thought it was some sort of royalty, real royalty. I had no idea.
He's like a king.
You listen to Ernie.
I didn't.
Oh, he was Indian.
Well, our logo was the King Philip head, the Indian head, imposed over the arrowhead. And at some of the bubblers that we in the North call them, they had tiles, earth, wind, fire, and air, around the bubblers. That was one of the things.
Ernie, you're getting involved in. Are you getting involved in that business about the emblem or the logo?
Yeah, we'll put our 2 cents in with down the line here, but I met Grace when I came up from North Attleboro in the 2nd grade, and we've been together and friends ever since then. We've gone through quite a bit together, and when I moved up to Plainville, I moved up to an estate which is now the Dominican Academy, and there was people wandering around up there. As a young kid, I didn't know who they were, and the guy that owned it was Jim Toner, who was chairman of the board of Boston Edison in the 40s and 50s, and he had more money than anybody. He'd come down with his jump Cadillac, and all the fields down there, the apple trees and everything, they were just like your front yard. They were all meticulously mowed. And he'd have guys like Cardinal Cushing riding with him, and I got a picture of myself setting on a pony that was taken by this guy that took the picture, and then he went over on the old silo edge, and he was rubbing this stuff on it, and here comes this brown and white picture. Come to find out later on, it was Dr. Land with his experimental Land camera.
Yeah, Polaroid.
And
Oh my God.
you know, these are things when you're young that don't really do anything to you. But I say one of our best was the 4th grade. There's 2 buildings. There was King Philip. Yeah, there was Plainville High School and Plainville Elementary School. They were almost identical buildings on the same lot. The only one that was in the high school was the 4th grade. You were down in the basement. And down in the basement, there were still windows you could just see out of. They were like 4 foot high. And there was a wood stove. That was the heat. And if you were sort of act up or not the head of the class,
Not you.
well, you had this coal hod. You'd walk down the long
God.
Pathways down underneath in tunnels, real dark, and you go where the coal was, the old coal bins, and you bring back the coal, put it in the coal stove, which would be, unheard of for so many reasons nowadays. But of course, there was a lot of people in the high school that used to sneak down there for their cigarettes or whatever they were doing. But as a 4th grader, you really didn't know, but you had to watch yourself when you went down through there. You didn't want to scare somebody. But then the other, and I'm going to get Ian involved in this one.
Oh, Ian.
In Hayden back then, she came from a uppity town of Framingham. She was a college student, So we got together in Mr. Klein's class, which was science. And the desk that we had then had 2 seats, because you shared everything. And now she's super smart. So they bring us the formaldehyde frogs. Now, I spent my lifetime as all I could with a gun in my hand and a knife and a mouth in the woods all the time hunting. I lived with acres and acres, miles of wilderness. So they bring us the frog, and I should have been a surgeon because I could dissect that frog beautifully. And she could say all the names of every little nerve and muscle and everything else in Latin. So we sailed through those classes.
Did you want to chime in? You've got the mic there. Did you want to?
Except when I would pick up little pieces of frogs and kind of shake 'em at her and chase her down the hall.
Ernie, you're embarrassing me.
You embarrassed?
That can't happen.
But that's part of the culture shock that we were talking about. Imagine coming from that, and the same thing at Rentham, to King Philip. And we could leave at lunchtime and go to the center of town and have lunch and hang around the park. Any breaks we had, we were very free to do that.
Before King Philip.
What's that?
You didn't do that at King Philip.
No, of
No,
course you
before,
couldn't. Went to King Philip,
Yeah.
but that's what we came from, though, really.
Yeah.
You couldn't, Paul, remember this, you certainly couldn't put a garter snake in the teacher's drawer. Remember, Mr. Lucas?
This is true.
Mr. Lucas,
Or a tack on the chair.
I didn't do that. That was Charlie Campbell. We had one teacher who just couldn't fit, another anecdote. He would lock the door every day so nobody would come in and destroy the room, which of course they would do. And so we went over to the town to the hardware store and bought a skeleton key. It was an old building. We opened the door. And when he opened the door and came in, the whole class was sitting there. This happened several days in a row before he finally caught on that we had a key, you know?
You might, excuse me, you might want to put that mic a little closer to you because
Yeah.
I think she's telling me that, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, we had a key, and we opened the door, and about 15 minutes before he came back from lunch, we'd all go in the room and sit down, and he'd open the door, and he'd be so surprised, and we'd looked at him like we're surprised, that he was surprised. And this kind of stuff went on. We went to King Philip High School, my friends, I turned 16, I believe, and my friends had a birthday cake for me, and they lit candles. Well, at the old school, we could do something like that. Mr. Presley had no sense of humor at all. The whole bunch of us filled up the detention room.
That was the next thing I thought you might want to talk about was your recollection of teachers, because you had already spoken a little bit about, Bob, did you have any particular favorite teachers?
Well, I certainly can remember this, okay. A good question, okay. One of our teachers, Mr. Morgan, okay, mathematics, I'm quite sure. And certainly I didn't know it at the time or fathom it at the time, but indirectly he did instill an interest in me in mathematics, okay. And when I went to college, I mastered in or majored in you-know-what, mathematics. And so it's very difficult to establish a tie between the two, but I suspect there was something there, that the interest that he instilled in me in that course of study led me to that major at college, and indeed that major led me to the profession that I followed thereafter, and after graduation. So quite frankly, a very important facet, of King Philip. And another one, I mentioned two earlier, you may have mentioned, okay, big benefits, this may be the biggest one, okay, of King Philip High School. As you know, in various colleges, there are high schools, there are college representatives
To recruit students?
that call on the schools, okay, and talk to students who may indeed be interested in attending their college. And indeed, a representative, okay, real nice lady, okay, from Marietta College in Ohio, did visit King Philip at the time when I was a senior and nearing graduation. Somewhat questionable because I wasn't the best student in the school, but I worked, okay, and so everything just kind of...
And they wanted you.
It coalesced, okay? And she and I, we really kind of hit it off. Do you know how every now and then you could meet 100 people and one person, okay, you just kind of hit it off, you know? You have the mental
Connection.
communication and all. And anyway, based on the interest that she instilled in me in the college, okay, and whatever interest I instilled in her, enabled me to attend the college, major in the course that teacher Morgan taught, indeed, at King Philip. So quite frankly, that's a pretty impressive background, and indeed, as I mentioned before, that's what I used in my profession thereafter.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a very positive experience, if for no other reason, and certainly there were other reasons, but I consider those as majors.
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
You know, major considerations.
Now, Nancy, any recollection of teachers, any anecdotes about teachers or that you might like to share?
Well, the one teacher that took us to New York City, that was quite an experience.
Oh, right.
Right.
She swore them to silence, by the way. You just broke the vow about going to the movie. The play.
I'm sure they found out. It wasn't a movie, it was an actual play. It's really nice.
Judith, any remembrances of teachers that you might want to share?
I had a lot of respect for Dorothy McGraw. She talked to us, you know, down to earth, as well as being an excellent teacher.
What did she teach?
She taught, I think she taught shorthand and maybe typing. And
Hand typing, yeah,
all through my
bookkeeping.
grown-up life, I was appreciative of what I learned because I got through some challenging times by the skills I learned from her.
Oh, that's good.
And I appreciated Mrs. Vile, the guidance counselor. And I didn't have Rick Sargent, but nobody mentioned his name yet, and he seemed like he was maybe the most popular, well-liked
Rick Sargent.
teacher
Yeah.
in the high school. Maybe
History,
somebody
where's
can talk
history?
about that.
Yeah, he was a down-to-earth guy, Rick Sargent, and one of my friends who, a couple of years below us in '62, he was a good friend with Rick Sargent, and Rick would say, "Hey, Bake, go get a sticker on my car for me, and bring me back a couple of cigars."
You remember the ring? The ring?
Oh, yeah,
In class, he'd walk up behind him and give you a rap on the head with a ring. I never got one,
right.
but I know people that
Rap
did.
on your head.
They never wrapped on my head, but yeah.
Any of the guys that was acting up, he'd walk up behind me, he had this great big ring, college ring or something.
Yeah.
Boom, he hit him on the head. You couldn't do that.
No.
Today you couldn't do something like that. It was kind of like a love tap, but
Yeah.
but it was he was just known for it, you know.
He was also a basketball coach.
Yeah.
Grace, any teachers that you really
Our
liked or?
science teacher, Mr. Klein, came from, we had him in Plainville, and at the time, I didn't really appreciate him, but we got to King Philip, and he was very good, very, very good.
Well, we're talking about Mr. Klein. I never had. I get along with everything else, but he said something to me one day that stuck to me all of my life. He says, "You're always killing time." I said, "Yeah." And he says, "The best way to kill time is to work it to death." And that always stuck in my mind and kind of gave me a push of what I did, you know, the rest of my life. At the in shop we had what we called the teacher, the little colonel. The shop teacher, Mr. Tuzignat,
Yeah.
and he stood about 5'3", maybe.
Yeah.
But he could take. He worked him and his brothers worked as carpenters all the time, and he could take everybody, including some of the big boys, and put them right down in arm contests.
Right.
The ironic thing about it was, about 10 years later, when I was running a crew over in Attleboro, he worked for the union carpenters during the summer when he had nothing to do. So I'd call the hall for a couple of men, and here he comes. So now he's working for me. And I was kind of hard on him for the first 4 hours. We had some doors to hang that were 10 foot high, 4 foot wide, and about 3 feet wide for this blast furnace area. And I put him with another guy on there, and he did a nice job of it. We got to be good friends, and we went out to dinner with our wives and him together. It worked out. Another nice one was Alice Church.
Yeah.
Right, Mrs. Church.
And
had her
a
in
lot of people
Plainville.
didn't know is, if you go down to Martha's Vineyard, there's a place called Church's Landing. That was owned by her parents.
Oh.
And she was telling me on how the hurricane of '38, when it came through, they were up in the 3rd floor of the building, and their feet were still getting wet.
Wow. Oh, my
Yeah.
God, that's
And
horrible.
I had a lot of nice conversations with her. I
People
really,
died in that hurricane.
She was
I
lovely.
really didn't have a class with her. It just we started talking, and we just kind of like talking to each other,
She was from Plainville. Did you not have her in Plainville?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, yeah, all the way through. And we were talking things that you couldn't do at King Philip. We had a sophomore dance
Right.
at Plainville High School, and some of the guys decided to go up and ride the pendulum of the 6-foot clock that was up in the attic.
Right, the pendulum.
Yeah, it was a 6-foot-long pendulum hanging down.
And it bore the weight?
Well, it bore the weight until it broke one of the teeth out of the clock itself.
Oh, my gosh.
So-
That's horrible.
So all the money that we made from our school dance went to fix a couple of teeth on the clock.
You mean one of the cogs? One of the oh,
No control.
And then if you wanted to, Don's Diner was right next to Plainville High School. But there was a 6-foot-high chain link fence right to the curb. And the teachers would be up in the school, and they'd be looking down there and making sure nobody left to go over to the diner, because you could get a bag of French fries like this for $0.25. And what we would do is everybody would congregate right there in that circle. Once you got about 30 people there, one person in the center would duck down and ease through everybody's legs, get around the fence, walk over to the diner,
Get them.
get a bag or two of French fries, work their way back, come into the center, stand up, and we pass the French fries around. And they could never see who went.
oh my God.
We also, in Plainville, we never had a cafeteria until they built the new elementary school. There was nothing in the high schools. So when it was time for dinner, we'd go up to the other school. In that school at that time, we had windows, the old type that,
Oh, you had
Here-
to use the stick.
well, yeah.
Yes.
And they were approximately 10 foot high, 5 foot wide. Of course, they seemed bigger back then, but if you were on the ground floor, you just opened the window and jumped out the window. You didn't have to follow the class around to the front.
No screens.
No, God,
No,
no.
no.
And those windows actually came in handy, too, because everything was a call fire department, and the fire department is across the street from the school. So the minute that fire alarm went off, 90% of them worked at Whiting and Davis, where they had a special area for their vehicles. We would time them, see how long it would take to come, get the fire engine, and be out on the road. And so everything stopped when the fire alarms went off. That was, again, something we missed when you went to a big school. Everything was regimental. You had to do this and you had to do that at a certain time. And when you got up into one of your higher classes, you worked the telephone in the principal's office. And back then, even the principal's office, I used to come down from where I lived. It was a mile from town. And I'd carry my rifle, a shotgun down, and put it in the principal's office if I was going hunting with the guys after school. I mean, nowadays I'd be, up here at the Waldorf Astoria. But,
Did they ever let you on the phone in the office?
oh, we answered the phone.
And you as well?
Oh, yeah, I was good enough to do that,
Different
'cause-
time, Ernie.
yeah,
I lived near Ernie, and we walked around with guns. We lived in farm country, and it was nothing for my cousins and I to walk down the street, and a police car would go by and be carrying 22s. It
was a different culture,
15 years old. It was a different time.
Different world.
We weren't going to shoot anybody, though.
Get close to your phone.
Oh, well, we weren't going to hurt anybody. I think we were a lot more mature in those days. I really feel that by the time we were 16 or 17, we were like a 30-year-old today.
Well-
I was thinking about future, what I wanted to do with my life and working and things like that, rather than playing.
You weren't babied.
We weren't babies, and we weren't babies.
He was
no.
my nearest neighbor, and he was a mile away.
Yeah.
You know, I just wanted to
Sounds like me, Ernie.
Yeah.
You're
You're
5
raw
miles away.
horizontal.
I was invited.
Mine
To,
were all dead.
I was invited to Bob's house a number of times, and as the Beverly Hillbillies say, my mother wouldn't let me go because Bob had a cement pond.
Oh,
They had a pool across the street from their house, and she wouldn't let me go until I guess I never did because we got older and got separated. But she was very cautious. My mother was a very cautious person. She'd let me carry a gun or do anything like that, but she wouldn't let me go to Bob's house.
What's wrong with the cement pool? If you dived in, you might...
Well, I was just afraid we were going to drown or something. It's just I don't know what her fear was.
Now, you know, one last topic is the Jolly Charlie, which which Ernie tells me that there were many adventures.
Oh, boy.
What do you, anything you want to
Almost
tell?
remember that.
I can tell you a story. I had this
Good.
girlfriend, and I only had a couple of dollars in my pocket, and we went out one night to a dance, and we went to Jolly Charlie's,
Afterwards.
and
Yeah.
we got a huge box of clams, and that was the last of my money, and as she's putting on, I said, since when does Revere make salt?
With sugar.
She
I
put
got the
sugar,
wrong packet.
actually sugar
Oh,
on the clams,
more money.
and I
That's the
didn't have
end.
another nickel.
I ruined
I
everything.
kept it anyway.
He still married you.
Bob, what about you at the Jolly Charlie? Any adventures?
good Lord.
Or did you?
You could be here all day.
Sometimes we never
Ernie,
get there.
Ernie can
Where
certainly
exactly was it?
Second this,
Parking
okay?
lot.
But for those,
Right
It was on
across the
Route
Stop
1
and
in
Shop.
North Attleboro,
Across the Stop and Shop.
about halfway down to where Route 1 and 1A come together as you
Oh,
were
yes.
heading south.
Yep.
Right now, it would be across from the Stop and Shop.
Yeah, the new Stop and Shop.
Yeah, the new Stop
Oh,
and Shop.
okay. So, Bob, what were you going to tell us?
well, listen here. For car buffs, okay, like Ernie and I, okay, Jolly Charlie's was the only place to go. So we'd spend the week working on our cars, okay, getting the pipes good and loud, okay, and
Oh,
the
no.
engine sounding great, okay, and the thing polished up maybe, and doodads and all of that. And why would we do that? So when we head to Jolly Charlie's Saturday night, okay, we could rev up our engines along with everybody else, and it was a real fun time, if the truth be known. You know, we'd kind of park out a little bit in back of Jolly Charlie's so it didn't screw up their business, you know, and we'd shoot the breeze and we'd rev the pipes, you know, and we'd knock each other's vehicles, okay?
Oh, my Lord.
It was also a lot darker way back out
what's
there.
that?
It was a lot darker way out
Oh, yeah,
too, you know?
yeah, right. Good point, very good point, yeah, very good point, Ernie.
There were hundreds of people there on a
So
Saturday
us
night.
car nuts, we certainly remember that about Jolly Charlie's, and of course we'd fuel up not the cars but the bellies, you know, at Jolly Charlie's as well. It's a fun place to go.
Was there service at the cars?
No,
You went in.
well, I don't think there was. I don't know.
Yes,
No,
yes,
you're
there
right.
was at one
Maybe
point.
there was.
When it first opened,
Yes, there was, yeah.
Charlie Nason he owned a franchise of all New England for soft serve ice cream. He lived in Cumberland, and he had his soft serve place right next to it. The area where that is, and across the street where Sandy's, which was a little sort of like one of the dollar stores they have now.
Oh, yeah.
Those swamps on both sides. You couldn't fill those swamps in today. So my father was a foreman for a large construction company in North Attleboro. And they were approached to bring in gravel to fill these areas in to make Jolly Charlie's and Sandy's. So their pit was out on Plain Street, which is by where the old registry was. So for some reason, they're digging this pit down, and they're digging and digging and digging, and they're way below where they should be, and they're taking everything they can out of there, and they're putting it over there for Jolly Charlie's and for Sandy's. Well, come to find out, they had found out down the line that the surveyors were coming through, and that's where Route 95 was going to go.
Yeah.
So where Route 95 came through, there was nothing but a big hole in the ground. So a lot of the gravel they had taken out, and they had too much for, to do Jolly Charlies and that. They sold it back to the government to fill the hole in that they had taken it out of. But I still have to this day a watch that Charlie Nason gave to my father as part of appreciation for building Jolly Charlies. They had one small building when they first started off, and they even had metal trays. Those disappeared. Everybody kept them for souvenirs. Then they brought in little trains, little Ferris wheels and stuff
Right.
like that. Yeah, and that became a little kiddie area out towards the front. But we maintained our areas out in the back there where, you could bring a date, find a date, bring a little adult beverage, or buy a little adult beverage. And it was a meeting place for everybody down in that whole area. They came from all over.
Yeah.
And then if your children got on the honor roll, you could bring their report card and show them they brought all the amusements free.
Is it, say again, Nancy, what did they do? If you brought your report card? you-
Yes, to show that you were on the honor roll, A's and B's.
Yes.
They could ride all the amusements free. Only a certain night of the week.
Clarence, did you hang out there as well?
Yes, with my 51 Mercury cruising around.
Eddie, did you have a car at the time?
57
good
Ford
grief.
convertible.
Oh, my God. And Grace, what about Jolly Charlies? What do you recall?
Well, we would go there. Everybody would hang out there. I had my father's 51 Chevy
So you all
station
were
wagon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
You got a license at 16, not like today where they have to go through all this stuff and they're 17 before they get a license. I mean,
Right.
I think the day after I turned 16, I had a license, so
Yeah.
something like that.
We were all driving.
Either you went to meet people at Jolly Charlies, or you would meet them or take them to an area called George Street.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
That sounds kind of
The
ominous.
Well, that was a shortcut. We leave the dance.
He always told me it was a
and I was
shortcut
telling
to
Nancy
Jolly
It was a
Charlies.
shortcut to Jolly
Never got
Charlies.
there.
Well,
Now
George
we'd never
Street
get
was
to Jolly
dirt
Charlies.
then.
It
was a dirt road.
They had a GIQ when you were heading for George Street, okay?
What's that?
GIQ was, remember I told you about Mr. Gansett? Mr. Gansett that we used to keep in the crib over here?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Gansett was Narragansett Lagavir,
Oh, really?
and the GIQs.
Everybody remembers the GIQs.
GIQs are the giant imperial quartz. And we keep them in the crypt. Oh, it sat in the
this
wall
one
with you
over
a few
here?
times. Yeah, the little crypt right over here.
At the
yeah.
library.
Yeah. And, oh yeah, when I
Were
first,
there no bodies in there?
no. They only put 'em in-
What they do?
they only put them in there in the winter when you couldn't
room
dig a
for
hole.
bodies.
But see,
I did-
but the thing is, I wouldn't do any of that. So when his mother loved me, because when I met him, he got distracted from all that bad stuff.
Then I drop her off.
At home, yeah,
You go back to Jolly Charlies. But fortunately, he lived on one end of George Street, and I lived on the other end of
Yeah.
George Street.
We had it pretty well covered, yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to? We've got about 4 or 5 minutes. Does anybody in the audience want to
Ian, finish that story about the bugs that are...
comment?
The story with the
Bugs.
thing you were cutting out.
The dissections.
We cut up a frog.
Okay.
That was part of the biology course in Plainville. I want to just make a mention of the fact that when I went to King Philip, it was like a culture shock because it was so small. I came from Framingham. Plainville was absolutely insane. I mean, there was, 20 kids, and that was a whole class. And when I went to King Philip, the class was about 100, which is like a quarter of the size that I had been in Framingham. So it was a reverse cultural shock, sort of in that respect. But I knew it was a brand new school, and it was a great experience. I have appreciated it more in the latter years, the friends and the thoughts of my being in King Philip. And Rick Sargent, the greatest teacher in the world. And I remember one time about, I don't know how it came about, but I brought in some fried grasshoppers to the class. And Rick Sargent he had an American history class. I don't know why this came about. But do you remember, I don't know if there's anybody else that brought
I
it.
remember you brought them
You get
in.
fried
Fried
grasshoppers.
So they
Yeah.
had fried grasshoppers.
Did you eat them?
And they had fried bumblebees back then.
Oh, Leslie?
And Eric, not Eric Sargent, but you brought him into the science class. And Mr. Klein says, I will give a
In
passing grade to anybody that will eat one.
You did that, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
So I got through that class all right.
You take them up on it, Ernie?
Yep.
But anyway, the King Philip class of 59, hey, what a great group, huh?
That's right.
Yes.
You know, so maybe we should close on that. You know, if anybody's watching that would like to get in touch, that maybe isn't already in touch with you, we'll have some information along the bottom of the screen. You know, would that be okay to get in touch with you?
Grace here is handling our reunion. And you can contact Grace. You want to give the...
We'll put it up.
Well, we'll
Okay.
put it up
Okay,
on
that's
the
good.
thing. And what we're going to do, too, after we do this show, we're going to go back and edit it. Those of us that are up here, their class book photos are going to be superimposed just momentarily over their faces. And you're
How
probably on
wonderful.
camera,
It
too.
look
looked
the
much
same.
better than Ernie. That's a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
I told you, Ernie, the boys
Yeah, you'll
don't
have hair.
age. It's the
And then-
girls.
Then we're going to show a few of the pictures that we have collected, and we are going to show a slow pan through the class yearbook of 59. So everybody, it'll be slow enough so you can read it. I had some real nice 50s music made up, and we're going to try to get it in there, but we're running across problems. But anyway, we're going to do what we can do. And in closing,
What were you going to say, Judy? Weren't you just going to say something? She was going to say something.
Oh.
I thought you went.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm just enjoying the entertainment.
okay.
So we need to close because
Yeah, I only need these if I need to read. I just found out that the profile of King Philip will be phased out slowly this year. The first classes of King Philip worked hard on school colors, names, and emblems. Speaking for myself and a lot of my fellow classmates, we're not happy about the change. Just because a few people want political correctness, we have to change history. And to them, I propose this new emblem.
Oh, no.
Mr. Alfred E. Newman.
And that's the chieftain stone.
Very good.
I used to read that
Oh,
faithfully.
yes.
Thanks very much for watching. I'm Anne Marie Battistone. This is Norfolk Cable TV, and you've been watching a reminiscence of the class of 1959 at King Philip High School. Thanks very much for watching.